Welcome to the morning show here on Sports Empire Network. It's the morning show. It's the morning show with Chris, and it's the morning show with Mo. Mo, how are you this morning, sir?
Doing great, coming off that first big football weekend. I mean, college football. Coach Prime does it again. We got pro football, and there's so many quarterbacks that answered the bell that we had questions about, and there's a couple of others that didn't. So there's so much to talk about coming off this big football weekend.
You said it, Mo, and we're going to jump right into things. We have no time to waste. So to get the show started, let's welcome JG to the show because we got a lot of things to discuss, and JG is one of the guys that we have things to discuss with. JG, good morning, sir. How are you this morning?
Good morning. How you guys doing?
Hey, what's good, JG?
Just another day with it.
JG, we appreciate you being on the show, and we're going to start this Football Monday talking a little Major League Baseball because I'm confused. And I'm not confused about the Yankees. They had a rough weekend, but hey, you know what? If you can go 10 and a third innings without getting a hit and then still find a way to win, you know what? Yes, we suck. I get it. Moving on. So, JG, I need to understand what is taking place in Washington because a couple of weeks ago, we get the news that Steven Strasburg is going to retire from Major League Baseball, and my initial thought was, damn, what talent that we just didn't see come to be. He came on to the scene as a phenom, and then injuries just destroyed and derailed his career, and we never really saw what we thought we were going to see after his first season or two in the league. And then some people may not have even known that he was still technically in the league because over the last, 2 or 3 years, I think he's only appeared once. So he's been dealing with some nerve damage. He's been dealing with a couple of different injury things. So some people may have thought he was already out of the league or retired, but that's not the case. So he announces that he's going to retire. He's going to retire in September. Okay. And then we get news that there's going to be some sort of a news conference or a press conference with Washington to kind of confirm or officially announce his retirement. And we're like, okay. But then it takes a twist, JG. Then we find out that the team has canceled the press conference. And when I originally saw that, I was like, well, maybe they're just moving it. Like it didn't really. It struck me as odd that they were reporting that the team canceled the press conference, but it didn't necessarily strike me as odd that maybe they're moving it. That stuff happens sometimes. But then we find out that not only are they canceling it, it's not happening. And now the owner is saying, "See you in spring training." JG, from what I've read, he's disabled. Like he has nerve damage. He's considered disabled by like the medical standard. He's not pitching in Major League Baseball again. What is going on in Washington?
Well, it was coming from somebody who has some nerve damage from his career, and I have that in my leg. It's not fun to deal with. Thoracic outlet syndrome is what he was diagnosed with, and it is nerve damage in the shoulder. You have to have surgery in essence, to remove a and I'm kind of, again, I'm not a doctor. I'm speaking just based off of some of the information I've read. You have to remove certain aspects of the bones of the ribs to help relieve some of the nerves in the shoulder to be able to get the pain, or at least the inflammation, off of what's going on in the nerves. And it's usually a career ender. And there's I mean, that you don't hear. It's one thing. It's an injury that you don't hear very often at all. And the situation, it sounds like, the owner of the Nationals was more upset about the leak of the dispute of the financials here. And again, he's owed a lot of money. Steven Strasburg owed a lot of money over the next couple of seasons, still next 3 years, I believe is what it is. And he's going to retire, and it's guaranteed. It's Major League Baseball contracts are guaranteed. So you're not wanting to pay this guy who's going to retire, and still have to owe him millions and millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. But you're gonna have to try to figure out how to save face by making this thing public, public. And so what he's doing basically is saying, okay, well, hey, he's not retired. We're going to see him in spring training. I'm sorry. There's no way. There's no way Strasburg is coming back to pitch after this. I'll be very shocked if he is, because this is such a severe injury that he is dealing with. There's not a likelihood. He hasn't pitched since the midway point of 2022. So we're talking about a year and a half gone by, almost, and then by spring training, it's closer to 2 years that he hasn't pitched in a major league game. You're going to say, "Oh yeah, hey, we'll see him in spring training." It's very bad look by the Nationals. It's very bad look by the owner because he's more upset about the leak of the financial dispute more than anything else that took place. So he's trying to save face by saying, "Well, he's not retired. Well, he's gonna come back and pitch." And it's so bad. It's very bad. I don't see it happening. He wants to retire. Let him retire. Instead of putting him out there and basically making it worse for himself, to try to say, "Hey, yeah, we're gonna let him pitch. He can't be what he used to be for sure." And that's going to be guaranteed. Just about, he won't be the same pitcher. Let him retire. You agreed to the contract. This is what the CBA is. Pay the man. Let him go out right on to the sunset. Retire his number as one of the greatest pitchers in Nationals history.
Now, JG, I guess the confusing part for me is this happens in baseball all the time. The Reds, either they're still paying Griffey or they've been paying Griffey for a long time. The Mets were paying Bonilla for a long time. This is something that we see sometimes in Major League Baseball where, you give a player a huge deal. The player, either retires naturally because the end of the career has been reached, but the deal was just so big, you knew you were going to pay them beyond their deal anyways, or the player has to retire early for injuries or whatever reason. You pay them beyond the deal. It's not like this is new territory for Major League Baseball. It's not like the Nationals are like, we're not going to be the first team that ever has to do this. This is something that is almost commonplace in Major League Baseball. So with that in mind, I guess I'm confused because if you look at it, not only would you not be the first team to do this, but the other rate is the guy can't pitch. So you would rather pay him trying to force him to pitch and potentially lose games for you, as opposed to, because you got to pay him regardless. So either you're going to pay him while you're forcing him to play and potentially lose games because he can't play, or just move on, try to win. Great thing in baseball because you got to pay him anyways. So I don't
The
understand what the hang up is.
Yeah, the hang up is they're going to try to dispute the contract first. If they can, so let's play devil's advocate here. Let's say if they're able to dispute the ability of paying him the full amount that he is owed. All right, let's just say an arbitrator says, "Hey, you don't have to pay the full amount that he's owed." Well, let's say you have to pay him 70%. Nationals will go, "Okay, hey, you're fine. Go retire now." Or they're going to say 50% is what you're going to be owed. Go ahead and retire now. But if you have to pay the whole 100%, the owner's like, "Well, hey, no, 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 no. We're not going to let him just go and retire at that point." That's what it sounds like to me. I'm speaking facetiously here, saying that I'm not in the rooms of the owner, so I don't know for sure. But that's conversations actually that do occur by owners in Major League Baseball. If they feel like they have to, if they can find a way to cut, and I'm not just talking about Major League Baseball, all owners try to do this. All owners try to figure out how to save, to save money off of a contract that's guaranteed. Everyone tries to do this as well. But if they can figure out a way to say, "Hey, we didn't know the severity, we didn't know this was going to be a career ender, and the longevity of what this contract was going to be at risk, we wouldn't have done this." That's what they're trying to play the wording for. But that's not how that works. That's not how Major League Baseball contracts work. As you said, there's a history where guys get paid even after career enders. They still get paid. So cheap owner trying to make cheap moves to sully a great player in his organization, and potentially, and I've read this as well, this is something that could damage the relationship of Steven Strasburg with the Nationals, to where they're going to say, "Hey, you're going to retire your number. We're going to put you in the Team Hall of Fame." If this goes down the road, I think it's going to go to, that's not going to happen. And you're going to have a lot of pissed off fans because, again, Strasburg was a very integral part in your World Series championship that you won in 2019. And this is something that it's not going to look good for the Nationals. This is going to be a very dark look and a very big black eye in the organization's face.
To Chris's point, real quick, JG. So the owner's trying to be cheap. Basically, he's trying to squeeze whenever he can out of Strasburg. Is there a way? I guess I'm asking, Strasburg can fight this. I mean, like Chris said, the man's disabled. It's not like he's ever going to be able to be anywhere close to what he was or is he obligated to go out there and pitch if that's what they want from him?
No, he's not obligated. He's not obligated because, again, at the end of the day, the players' union is going to fight this. If it gets down to that road, the players' union will fight and say, our contracts are guaranteed. Sorry, this is what y'all have agreed on. Now, as it always transpires, when an issue of the CBA comes up, this might be a conversation down the road in the next CBA. Every time that something that owners don't like, they're going to find a way to say, okay, we're going to put a clause in the contract. If a career-ending injury occurs, something like that, then the contract can be void to a percentage. That might be a conversation. The players' union better fight that. They better find a way to just say, absolutely not going to happen, because we've been doing this for so long with guaranteed money that you don't have a leg to stand on to say that we need to give up money for you guys. No, but he's not obligated to pitch if he can't pitch.
Right.
Now, he has his doctors. The team doctors may also, the team doctors may say, well, hey, he can pitch, and his doctors that he's going to get opinions by say, no, he can't. That's going to be the dispute. It's going to be the biggest issue more than anything else, is who is going to say what and who's going to side with who that says, hey, he can pitch versus he can't. The issue for the Nationals, and this is, like I said, is this injury is so outside of what we've normally heard in sports that there's not a lot of precedent of guys coming back from this. Tommy John, over a while, was one of that. Then we started seeing players coming back from Tommy John and getting better. Now we have a history and a precedent that Tommy John is not a career ender. It used to be. You talk about 40, 50 years ago, Tommy John was a career-ending injury. Now it's not. ACL injury for a while was looked at as a potential career-ending injury. Today it's not. As of right now, thoracic outlet syndrome is looked at as a potential career-ending injury. We don't see guys coming back. We don't hear about it. We don't see guys coming back from it. So that's where this is going to get really sticky for the Nationals, that they can sit there and say, oh yeah, he's clear to play. There's not a lot of precedent set that's the case. So I don't see the Nationals winning this argument that if Strasburg wants to retire because he physically cannot pitch anymore, they cannot say, well, we're not going to pay you because we didn't think this was going to be the case. That's part of sports. That is part of sports. So I mean, they're in it's a very tough situation. It's going to be a very bad situation. But Steven Strasburg, if he wants to retire, he's not obligated to pitch.
Now, JG, some interesting news that might benefit the Atlanta Braves. We come to find out that Ohtani's camp is on the record as saying that he will value winning over location. So he would prefer to be on a team that is going to contend for championships year in and year out wherever he goes, as opposed to a team that is specifically on the West Coast. Now, people are going to look at this and be like, well, the Dodgers are going to be contending for a World Series and they're on the West Coast. He's still going there. But if that was the case, he's not going to say that. Maybe he still does because he wants to drive up his market. He wants to get into a bidding war because he might be losing money now. So that could be a part of it as well. So, JG, I ask you this. Is there any chance that it's not the Dodgers or a West Coast team? Because up to this point, before the injury, all we heard was West Coast team. We heard he didn't like losing in Anaheim, but all we heard for his new team was West Coast. And we assumed Dodgers, maybe the Padres, they have a all-star talent team there on offense. Maybe the Mariners, they have an up-and-coming young team. All of those have winning in common. But now he's specifically saying winning over location. Does that open the door for an East Coast team? Because if he wants to win, JG, the Atlanta Braves are set up for the next 4 years. The next 4 years, they are going to be World Series contenders, hands down, each of the next 4 years. Why not go there? Because if you just want to win, that team's got you set.
Well, you said it at the beginning too, was that you're wanting to keep the market open and try to keep it, as many teams. The more teams you have interested, the higher the dollar amount's going to go. So if you were to come out and say, I'm only interested in West Coast teams. All right, so we'll look at the West Coast teams. That's the Dodgers, that's the Giants, and that's the Mariners, because he's already in Anaheim right now. San Diego already has $300 million players. I don't think they can go to another player like that. They're trying to sign Soto as well. They want to sign Juan Soto. He's going to be a $300 million player. So you're not going to look at it and say you're going to have 4 or 5 $300 million players on your payroll. That's just not going to happen. So you have to almost rule out San Diego in that aspect of. So West Coast teams, your market is Dodgers, Giants, and Mariners. That's not a big market you want to have. So you have to expand it out and say, hey, we're open to all teams in the league. We're open to the East Coast. We're open to anybody who is interested, in Shohei Ohtani. The Braves do make sense because, as you said, it's a young team. The core age group of this group is 26 years old, which is, I mean, and the fact that they've been winning, they've been competing for division titles for the last 5 years. This is number 6 they're closing in on right now, 6 straight of division titles with a World Series wrapped in the middle, and they're going to be the favorites to win the World Series this year as well. You have money in Atlanta too, with what they've basically have started with the Battery, the sports entertainment complex that's outside the stadium that a lot of teams are now kind of gravitating to throughout sports itself. They have money to do so, and they're going to find a way to cut actually a little bit of more money. I think Marcelo Ozuna is going to be out the door, even though he's had a great season so far. He's going to be someone who's a little bit on the older side. They're going to find a way to try to trade him. So that opens up a little bit more money on your payroll from there. So things can line up to have Shohei Ohtani come to Atlanta. That is a possibility. I don't think it's going to be likely because I do think that he wants to stay on the West Coast, which is closer to Japan, which is what a lot of the Japanese guys, they do play in the West Coast more. You do have a couple. Atlanta did have a Japanese pitcher, Kenshin Kawakami. We've seen Boston Red Sox have Japanese ball players. The New York Yankees had Japanese ball players. We have seen Japanese ball players play on the East Coast. I just think that Ohtani is a little bit more wanting to stay on that side of the country, on the West Coast side. And I said this in the group with you guys. I think the Mariners. I think it's the Mariners because of his relationship with Ichiro Suzuki. Ichiro being one of the most prominent Japanese ball players in Major League Baseball history. And his relationship he's an idol. Like Ichiro is an idol to Ohtani. He looks up to Ichiro, and he's been a very, very big advocate of his career so far. So I think the relationship's going to decide a little bit more for Ohtani to go to Seattle, but it does make sense to go to Atlanta just because, again, if winning is a priority, winning's a priority. Atlanta makes sense because, as you said, the longevity of winning already five division titles in a row, on the verge of 6 World Series favorites, young, talented team around you. That's why I kind of side with the Braves over the Dodgers for Ohtani because the Dodgers don't have. I mean, they're a little bit on the younger side, but you still have a lot of older players too right now. You have a little bit older players, and they're a little bit in flux with their finances. They cut payroll a little bit this year. They made decisions to cut payroll, whereas the Braves have not really cut. They've been growing their payroll to say, this is our window right now. We're going to extend our window to make sure that we're winning not just 6 straight years, but 8 straight years, 10 straight years. They're going to try to do a match the team of the 90s and early 2000s of 14 straight division titles. They're on the verge of matching that right now. And I know we're still 8 long ways away from that. But the Dodgers are in their own window right now. I think they're kind of figuring out what their plan's going to be because they made decisions letting Trey Turner go. Max Scherzer, which I think that was a great idea for them to not try to make a move to keep Scherzer. But they have made some mad moves lately that have kind of haunted them right now and where they're at in their season in 2023 and how they're going to figure out to move forward in their future. Braves already have their plan figured out. If Ohtani's involved in that plan, my goodness, I'll throw this out there just for you guys. Can you imagine Ronald Acuna and Shohei Ohtani as number 1 and number 2 hitters in the batting order in Atlanta? Ugh, that's a little scary to think.
Mo, I sit here and I listen to JG, and I just think of a younger me talking about the Yankees in the 90s. And now I look at where we are now, and I'm a little jealous. I'm a little Kansas City Royal, Detroit Tiger vibe over here with my current situation. Just listening to the haves just potentially have more. And I get it. I get why there's so much Yankee hate back when they were doing this to everybody else. But JG, everything you said is correct. I mean, they're head and shoulders the best baseball team in Major League Baseball this season. They have been the past couple of seasons. And it's great to be in a spot where you don't need the greatest player in baseball to be on your team because you're already set up in the right direction to win championships. But the fact that you might add him anyways is a really great position to be in, JG. Much like the position of LSU, who hung 70 this weekend just to kind of right in the ship a little bit. And JG, we're going to get to that in 1 second. But Mo, before we get to LSU, I want to touch on Coach Prime in Colorado. So we saw what took place week 1, the shocker with TCU. Most people didn't think they were going to beat TCU. People thought it was going to be close. People thought that they might hang in there. But in the end, most people thought TCU was going to pull it out. That wasn't the case, obviously. So now we go into week 2 and we look at what was the national story, what was the national narrative heading into week 2. And it was a little more balanced. You had people in the world of college football say they have a chance to go in there and knock off Nebraska. And at the same time, you have people saying Nebraska's going to humble them. Nebraska's going to bring them back down to earth a little bit. There's no defense in Colorado. Nebraska's going to run all over them. And it's going to be a week 2 humbling experience for Coach Prime. But Mo, that wasn't the case because after a slow start, Coach Prime and company rolled them. So now Coach Prime is 2-0. And Mo, I ask you, where do you sit on this team moving forward as of this morning?
They're just fun to watch. And I know some people will watch them waiting for them to lose so they can say gotcha. I'm just watching to see the development of the players on both sides of the football. I'm just watching to see if Coach Prime can actually lead them to a bowl game. Maybe they end up being 8-3 or something like that. I don't see them going undefeated, but that's not, and it's not because I'm rooting against them. I just think that they have some very talented playmakers on both sides of the ball, but I think their overall talent is still lacking. But what they can be dynamically, offensively, you've seen it. You've seen it. Their quarterback can attack you with his legs and with his arms, and they've got a couple of guys that attack the football at the White House. You throw the ball up, and they go get it. They've got guys that can make you miss in short spaces. So they're an exciting, explosive offensive team that every week they're going to be must see. It's just going to be interesting the journey that Coach Prime and his team goes on throughout the season because so many people are rooting for them, and there's probably just as many kind of rooting against them. But they're fun to watch. They're must see. I think they're bringing back casual college football fans.
JG, is the ceiling for this program a bowl game? If you look at it realistically, successful season, getting the most out of the season, is that a bowl game or is there more to that?
I mean, for the casual Colorado Buffalo fan, yes, get to get to a bowl game and you'll be happy. I can see this team, pushing a potential New Year's Six bowl. Like and again, you have to look at their schedule. Again, obviously the toughest game they're going to face is USC. Oregon's going to be a very tough game. Could I see them beating Oregon? Possibly. USC, I think that's going to be very tough. But if they navigate, a 2-loss season, which I think that's very likely, you can see this team be a New Year's Six bowl and put them at a place that nobody thought that the Colorado Buffalo program could reach for in a long time. And there's just this is the scary part about it as well is the more games they get going, the more confidence you're seeing that this team has. As you said, TCU game, they were able to figure out in their first game how to win a game. When you go 1-11 or whatever I think they were 1-11 or 1-10 last year, you don't know how to win a game. In their first game of the season, they figured out how to finish and hold and win the game. Now the next one is as you said, can the defense do something to navigate in that direction? Well, check. Yes, the defense played really well, and the offense continues to get more confidence in doing their part. So what's the next step for this team? Well, the next step is continue to dominate. And if you can get your confidence up as a team to dominate an opponent even more now, they're going to get to a point where you have to say, Colorado's for real. Now, I'm not saying for real as a national title contender or even a conference, Pac-12 conference contender, but they're going to be a very tough game. And if they continue with their confidence building, they may give USC a game. They may give them a tough out. And then if that's and that's what I think the goal should be, at least for this team right now, is if you can make that game competitive against USC, you won. You proved that what you're doing is correct. You proved what you're doing is working. If you're Deion Sanders, and all you got to do now is just continue riding the ship in the right direction, and you're going to be in a New Year's Six bowl. And I mean, can you imagine Deion Sanders, and his personality with this team being at a New Year's Six bowl? What else is going to already say about it? So again, for the casual Buffalo fan, yeah, just hey, get to a bowl game. I don't think that's the ceiling. I think the ceiling is a New Year's Six bowl. If they continue to build their confidence in doing their part, that's very likely. That's very likely. And I'll put it this way: Travis Hunter reminds me. I remember, and going to what you said about LSU just a second ago. Travis Hunter reminds me of Pat Peterson at moments where he was just an electric ball player, where they wanted to figure out how to get to give Pat Peterson opportunities on offense. We're seeing what that looks like with Travis Hunter being both sides of the ball with how he makes plays on defense and the electricity that he brings on offense. It's a lot of fun. It's absolutely a lot of fun. And as y'all say, this team's it's fun, exciting. And they're bringing people into the stadium, sellout crowds at Colorado. Who would have thought?
Now, JG, before we get you out of here, like I said, LSU, they hung 70 this weekend. It wasn't a contest; it was a shellacking. But looking at it as an LSU fan who saw the holes and the flaws and the mistakes from week 1, where do you sit now after seeing the week 2 performance? Did they fix the things they needed to fix? Obviously, the level of talent was different that they played against. But you, as a fan, you can look at this and be like, okay, they checked this box, they checked that box. Did they check the boxes you need to see them check in their week 2 victory?
Offensively, yes. I think it's a little bit better. Offensive, a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more consistent. That from Jaden Daniels being able to move the ball around. And I think that was, again, kind of see a little bit. We got a little bit of a way in Florida State and started getting a little bit more vanilla. And again, drops hurt against Florida State more than anything else. But you started seeing the ball was being moved. They were taking shots downfield. They were taking some risk and letting Jaden be able to make plays. Defensively was a little bit better outside of the secondary. Secondary still scares me. We're still very lack of talented right now in the secondary, which is something that we don't hear about in LSU. LSU is DBU. I don't care what Ohio State says. I don't care what Florida says. I don't care what Florida State says. I don't care what anybody. LSU is DBU, and right now our secondary is the weak link of our defense, and that's concerning because you will have offenses. We're going to see Mississippi State here pretty soon. They throw the ball. We're going to see Ole Miss here pretty soon. They throw the ball. Alabama can still throw the ball a little bit. Auburn's going to figure out how to throw the ball a little bit more. Florida, and I know Florida's here and there, but Florida can throw the ball. So you're going to have offenses that will throw. And if that secondary cannot hold, you're putting a lot of pressure on your front seven to actually get to the quarterback and put pressure every single play. That's not likely unless you're the Dallas Cowboys against the New York Giants. I digress. And I'm sorry, Freddie. But for LSU, that's going to be a very hard task to be able to do right now until you can really until you get things kind of smooth on that defensive side. The secondary is going to be the biggest question mark all year until you can get a little bit more talent back there, which you can't do right now. I mean, you can't just go sign a player and just put them out in there. You have to figure out you have to coach these kids up. And that's something that it's a little bit on the worrisome part for me is that secondary is just not to the standard of what DBU at LSU is supposed to be right now. And I said this weekend, it was supposed to be this way. LSU was supposed to blow out Grambling. I love the fact that for LSU and for the state of Louisiana being from there, we're connecting the schools together, LSU and Grambling. Last year was LSU and Southern. You're finding ways to connect the history of the universities in Louisiana. It was supposed to be a celebration. And that's what I love about it. It was a celebration of Louisiana football more than anything else in the game. It was supposed to be a blowout. LSU was supposed to do that to Grambling, but I love what these schools are doing in Louisiana. Is you're bringing these communities together, you're bringing these schools together, and you're celebrating Louisiana football. It was so much fun. And again, Southern last year was a lot of fun, and you're seeing a great community coming together and rallying on the football field together.
JG, before we get you out of here, we're going to let you make your Monday Night Football pick. Who do you like tonight, the Jets or the Buffalo Bills?
I'm going with the Buffalo Bills. I need to see it before I believe it with the Jets right now. And what I mean by that is, can they protect Aaron Rodgers? Can the offensive line actually protect Rodgers? We kind of saw that a little bit shaky. And it's been a history of shaky offensive line play from the Jets over the last few seasons, with injuries that have just absolutely, crushed their offensive ability to be able to move the ball. I know Rodgers is, really, he can move around the pocket. But if you're asking a 40-year-old quarterback to be able to move around the pocket quite a bit with a front seven, that I talked about with LSU, a front seven that can put pressure that the Buffalo Bills have. I'm not going to say it's the same as what we saw last night on Sunday Night Football, but Rodgers is going to be having to move around quite a bit behind that line, because I think the Bills are going to have a game plan to pressure him. They're going to make sure they're going to see, can your receivers, and I know that's a very talented receiver group that you have with Garrett Wilson, can your receivers make plays in 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds, and try to move the ball down the field that way? I don't know with that. So I'm going to take the Buffalo Bills to beat the New York Jets on Monday Night Football.
All right, JG. As always, we appreciate having you here on the morning show with us. Thank you for your insights, sir.
Absolutely, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, JG. We'll see you next time.
Definitely.
Mo, always a pleasure to have JG here on the show. And he touched on a couple of things that you and I are going to get to when we break down everything that took place in the world of the NFL week 1. But Mo, before we get there, disappointing news. Team USA, no gold, no bronze. I mean, at this point, if you didn't get the gold, who really cares, I guess. But at least go out there and wrap up the bronze, and walk away with the most you could have got. But they didn't. Right. They didn't. Where does this team go forward, Mo?
I guess the good news, if there's good news, is it wasn't the Olympics, right? Like, so when it matters the most, right? You want to win that gold medal. You want to represent your country and bring that back. So that's the good news. The bad news is, if this team is going to be the roster that goes into the Olympics, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. They're not going to get any bigger. They're not going to get any more physical. And they seem to have talent, but there's no chemistry. The construction of this roster was interesting, but like you and I both know, this isn't the top 10 best players in the NBA, right? These are some very good players, some all-star caliber players, but you wouldn't say that this is the very best team that the United States can put out there. There's not a Durant, there's not a Curry, a LeBron, and AD. I could go on. But if this is going to be the roster going forward, they're going to have a hard time winning the gold medal. I really believe that.
Now, Mo, in the initial fallout, if you will, of the loss, the rumors have started flying. Is Steph going to be a part of the Olympic team? Is LeBron going to be a part of the Olympic team? Some of the bigger players in the NBA have sort of said things, or there's been things floating out of their camp that they might be interested. And Mo, we've seen this before with Team USA. The bigger names in basketball are like, you young guys, you go do it. You go have fun. Go bring home the medal for us. Go represent. But in those cases where they don't get it done, Mo, we've seen it where the older guys, the veterans, are like, all right, I guess we'll do it ourselves. And they strap up and they go to battle. We saw it with Kobe back in 2008 with the Redeem team. There are those moments in Team USA basketball history where the younger guys, the less proven guys, stumble a little bit. And then the old guard says, fine, we'll step in and we'll take care of it. Do you see that happening for the Olympics, Mo? Do you see them getting more of a veteran roster in there because these guys want to step in and represent Team USA basketball?
So I think from a PR standpoint, Steve Kerr, USA Basketball, and all the people around that are going to say, no, this is the roster we're going to go with. In reality, by the time we get to the Olympics, yes, I believe Steph Curry, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, the older players, the stars, they're going to go, let us go ahead and go to the Olympics and win that gold medal. We'll do what you couldn't do. Don't worry, we got you. And they'll go and they'll win the gold medal. And it's no shade against these younger guys. These are talented younger guys who most of them they're nowhere near their peak, right? They're not the best of what they'll ever be. But when you start talking about the Olympics and where the United States has been held in terms of success and how we run basketball, I just think you can't let another country get in there and win that gold medal. So you got to bring in the big guns, point blank. And I do expect those kind of guys, Anthony Davis included, will be on that roster. They will call it, let's call it a reconstructioning of the roster construction. They're going to reconstruction that roster because right now, this roster, I don't believe can bring home the gold.
Now, Mo, interesting enough, Luka made some comments. Luka is playing with his home country during the FIBA tournament, and he was asked about his leg injury because he is clearly, based on watching him on the court, he has a nagging leg injury. So reporters asked him about his leg injury, and surprising, I guess the surprising part was how candid he was about the injury. He basically said, Mo, my leg is not okay. It's not doing well. I'm not healthy right now, but I'm going to continue to press forward and I'm going to continue to play hurt because the NBA season is right around the corner and I got to be there for my team. Mo, I don't want to hear that if I'm his coach or his owner or his teammates. I don't want you playing through a leg injury where you're acknowledging your leg is not okay. Like, I don't want you playing in a non NBA thing if your leg is not okay. Like, you have an NBA season coming up where you need to be contending for a playoff spot. And
Right.
once you make the playoffs, we want you to contend for a conference title and a championship. We don't need you further injuring your leg. We need you getting better.
Right.
So I respect the grit and I respect the I'm going to sacrifice it all for my team, but at the same time, you have a big NBA contract and a lot of people are relying on you to be healthy this season and you've acknowledged that you're not and you don't think it's going to get any better, Mo. So what are we doing here with this situation? Because in my mind, he shouldn't be playing in this tournament.
Right. I really think this is where the Mavericks management, Mark Cuban, um, Coach Kidd, I think they all have to get involved because you're telling everybody I'm not at my best. I'm struggling. My leg's not getting any better. And we're heading into training camp. You should be resting. You should not be on that leg. You should be getting treatment. Like your season's about to start. You're one of the 10 best players in basketball. You're your franchise's franchise player. And after a disappointing last season, they actually have high expectations this season. And you're still going to press forward and play. That doesn't make sense to me. I feel like Chris, there's a disconnect between management and some players. We didn't talk about this last week, but it's something that happened that bothered me a little bit. I don't know if you know this or I remember this conversation they had. Jaylen Brown of the Celtics played in the Big Three All Star game. And if you know the Big Three, it's the league that Ice Cube runs, and more or less, most of the players are former players who can still play, but are probably on the other side of their prime, and maybe guys that are undrafted players.
Mm-hmm.
But I just thought it was odd that he had just signed the richest contract in NBA history, and with no hesitation, he's out there playing in the Big Three. I'm not rooting against the Big Three, but if I'm Celtics management and you get hurt in the Big Three All Star game, you know what I mean? Like, I'd be thinking about: is there a way we can void a portion of this contract? Like, you didn't do this doing your job. You just on a whim decided to go play in a pickup. Well, it's not a pickup league, but do you understand that that seems like a disconnect between he and management that he would just blindly go and do that?
And Mo, we've seen over the years in different sports, they have clauses. You can't go jet skiing You can't be going snowboarding in the off season. It's just they put these clauses in for activities that the risk of injury is high if something goes wrong. And it's something that's been argued for years and years and decades by athletes of they want to live their life. They want to have the freedom to spend the off season doing what they want to do. They want to golf in between games freely. We had a couple of years ago where someone injured their back golfing. They swung too hard and they had a back injury. And then it was, well, should they be golfing in between games? And people were like, this is ridiculous. Like, you can't tell a player they can't golf in between, the games. But you look at it, Mo, and you're like, well, at the same time, when we pay you this much money, we need you healthy. And we understand that injuries happen in our sport. We
Right.
don't need you out there playing other sports, whether it be for fun, whether it be for recreation, whether it be a competitive, different league than our league. We don't need you doing what we already pay you to do or doing something else physical that we don't pay you to do, risking your body because we pay you for your body to be healthy to play
Correct.
for us. So if you're going to do something that's going to put that at risk, I understand the conversation of we don't want you doing that. But Mo, to your point, what I don't understand is why these teams aren't saying no.
Yeah. I don't understand that. You invest so much into these players. And I love that Jalen Brown wants to show support for the big three. I do. I think the big three is actually good. I think there's a way that the big three in the NBA can work in conjunction in some form or not. But I think I struggle with. You're talking about a team that has championship aspirations. You just gave him this monster contract. He is your second best player. I would say that Jalen Brown's probably a top 20-ish player, at least somewhere in that range. So there are high expectations for him going forward with the Celtics. But if he gets injured and there's no kind of clause in his contract that says, well, you got injured playing in the big three. So, you're going to be out for the next 40 games getting healthy and we've paid you this money. I'm just saying that if I'm management, it's something that JG brought up. When players start doing what Luka's doing, what Jalen Brown's doing, well, guess what? The next time the CBA comes up, you know what's going to happen. The owners are going to go, we need to put some language into the contracts now. Well, if you want to go out and live your life and you want to play in the big three or if you want to continue to play through an injury, even though we advise against it, our doctors advise against it, we're going to put some language in the contract that says if you're unable to perform your duties as you're supposed to, then we're going to take some money away, right? I mean, you're impacting our franchise by living your life, if you want to use those terms, when we've invested this much in you. I'm not saying that you should be able to control a player's private life, but you're a professional basketball player or professional football player, and you're paid to be able to play that game, knowing that you can get injured playing your own sport. Why would you go out and play a sport for free at risk of injuring yourself and hurting your team?
100%. Mo, it's time to get into week one NFL football. So much happened in the National Football League yesterday, and we still have the Bills and the Jets tonight. And we're going to close out the show with our picks for that game. But let's just jump right into it. Let's start breaking down some of the stuff that we saw yesterday on the football field. Let's start with the Ravens and the Houston Texans. Mo, first of all, Dobbins out for the season. So we talked going into this about the
That was
injury
tough.
bug with the Ravens, and 8 or 9 of their key players for this season all have an injury history. Can they stay healthy? One game in, Dobbins is already done for the season. So you're looking at this Ravens team now, and you're like, okay, that's one down. Next man up. They need everyone to stay healthy, Mo. They need to stay healthy for this team to be productive this season. But health aside, I wasn't that impressed with the offense. I really wasn't. Lamar didn't really jump off the page for me. It looked like he was still learning the offense.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
get that it's just week one. Um, you're playing the Texans, so the score looked good. It looked like a blowout on paper, but then you start dissecting the film and you start dissecting the actual numbers, and you're like, they didn't do a ton. So I think there's a lot of room for this Ravens offense to grow. I love Zay Flowers, and I love what Zay Flowers did. But aside from that, I'm not taking much away from the offense after week 1.
No, they won this game on the strength of their defense. And I would say this. I know you can look at the final score, but if you watch the game, the Texans defense is actually pretty good. It's actually a good defensive unit. But I don't care how good a defensive unit you are. If your offense is going 3-and-out, 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 you will get tired. You can get worn down, and then people can get opportunities to move the football on you. I wasn't impressed with the Ravens offense. I think they did just enough. I do. I think they did just enough. But like you said, if you watch the game, Lamar clearly doesn't have a total grip on this new offense, and I think he feels a little held back. Maybe with the onus on him staying in the pocket. I'm not sure that's his strength. At some point, you kind of have to let Lamar be Lamar, right? You have to let Lamar Jackson do Lamar Jackson things if the Ravens really do have championship aspirations. But you made a great point. Dobbins down, and he was playing well in that game. And just like that, he's out for the year. Now your instant concern is, okay, can OBJ stay healthy? Can Lamar stay healthy? Because if those two guys go down, now we're talking about a completely different season and the future of the Ravens in flux, really, going forward. So I hope as a football fan that they have no more major injuries, that no one has any more major injuries. Hoping for that. But they got the win. I guess that's the bottom line, but I wasn't all that impressed.
David Burns in the chat is saying, "What do you mean they were held back? Lamar Jackson looked good out there." David, my man, if you thought that was good Lamar, and you think that this offense is firing on all cylinders, I'm struggling for you because it wasn't. The Ravens were not firing on all cylinders, and if they weren't playing a team that offensively couldn't move the ball in the Houston Texans, I think it would have been a different outcome for them. But Mo, let's jump to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers knocking off the Minnesota Vikings. Well, for a team in a division that I don't think a lot of games are going to be won, this is big for Tampa to
It was
get
impressive.
on the board against a team that was everyone marked as an L. So to pull a win out in a situation where no one thought you were going to win in a division where you may only need 8 or 9 wins to win the entire division, this was impressive for Tampa Bay coming out to start the season, and it was equally disappointing for the Minnesota Vikings. This wasn't a Monday Night Football game. This wasn't a Sunday Night Football game. This wasn't the normal situation where Kirk Cousins, tends to poop his pants. But and I'm not saying it's all over because they lost week 1, and just because the Detroit Lions won week 1, it's not, Mo. But this is a little bit concerning if you're a Vikings fan because you should not be losing to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
You shouldn't be losing to them. And watching the game, Minnesota didn't have a problem moving the football. They had a problem scoring. They were just very inefficient inside the red zone. If you look at the numbers, Kirk Cousins played great except when they needed him in the red zone, right? And Baker, by the numbers, it wasn't pretty, but he was steady and he made timely throws. He made timely throws that Cousins didn't make late in the game. Like everybody would go, Jefferson had a monster game. He had a monster game between the 20s. He didn't do anything in the red zone. They kept like he had a monster game, but he didn't get any touchdowns. And I think if you're a Minnesota fan, you know your defense could be a little up and down, but I think that you thought you could rely on your offense. It's just game 1, like you said, so we don't write anybody off. But this is one of those games that if you're a Vikings fan, you had to have marked this off as a win. And if you can't beat the Bucks in week 1, that's very concerning.
I'll tell you who I'm writing on. I am writing on the San Francisco 49ers, Mo. They shut everybody up yesterday. All the questions about Brock Purdy coming in, all the questions about the offense. We knew the defense was going to be fine, but we had so many questions about what the offense and Purdy were going to look like. And they went out there against a good defense in the Pittsburgh Steelers, against a quarterback in Kenny Pickett, who people are talking about taking the next step this season and then being a wild card team or potentially a dark horse to win their division. And they dismantled that team in every aspect of the game. Mo, there was a point in the late in the second quarter where San Francisco had 199 yards of offense and the Steelers had 1 yard from scrimmage. Bosa was supposed to be on a pitch count because he's coming back because he didn't play during
Right.
the preseason. And they didn't need to pull him because there were so few offensive snaps by the Pittsburgh Steelers. He played the whole game on his pitch count without having to be pulled because there was no need to pull him because the Steelers weren't playing enough offensive snaps to where he had to come out of the game to sit. From start to finish, Mo, it was embarrassing if you're a Steelers fan, given the fact that you're going to be a wild card contending team. You have a top 10 defense. You have an emerging quarterback in Kenny Pickett. When you have all those things that you think are pointing up for the Steelers, and then you just get smacked down by the 49ers, who are basically like, by the way, we are still the best team in the NFC, Philadelphia, in case you were wondering. I mean, that's how I saw it, Mo.
I just thought they completely dominated the line of scrimmage. They just dominated the line of scrimmage. Like, the Steelers' offensive line got no push. Like, when they were trying to run the ball, 9 times out of 10, Najee Harris was getting hit in the backfield. They completely dominated the line of scrimmage. I thought Kenny Pickett looked like a deer in the headlights. He looked a little confused, a little nervous. He forced a few throws. Again, we're talking about a young quarterback, but a young quarterback that a lot of people had these high aspirations for said, look what the talent he has on the outside. He's got Najee Harris in the backfield. Their offensive line going to be must improve. To be fair to him and the Steelers, it's just game one. Every team they play won't be San Francisco. Every team won't have that kind of defense. And they'll obviously, with a coach like Mike Tomlin, they'll be better prepared. But to get so thoroughly dominated the way they were, it might make people pause with the idea they're gonna be a wild card team. It might make you want to pause a little bit.
And Mo, I would say that this is more on San Francisco being where they knew they were, but maybe the NFL world didn't think they were, as opposed to being an indictment on the Pittsburgh Steelers. The
I
Steelers could still be a wild card team, but I think the Niners have staked the claim that they are the first or second team in the NFC, hands down.
my concern coming into this season as a Niners fan was what you were going to get from Purdy. Could he pick it up, not just off of what he did last year, but also throw in the injury? What would he be able to do? How well had he recovered from that injury? And he was not impressive in practice. He wasn't impressive in preseason. And in game one, he looked like the guy that won 8 games in a row. He looked like the same guy. Made timely throws. He even pushed the ball down the field a little bit. I was not surprised with how well Brandon Ayuk played. He is their best receiver.
Mhm.
I've been saying that. I'm consistent about that. Devo's a better football player. Debo's a better football player. He's not a better receiver. There's a difference. And then when you get McCaffrey doing what he does, by the way, the reason why Debo is not highlighted as much as he was in the past in the offense is because of McCaffrey.
He does what he
McCaffrey,
does. They do the
right? He
same
does.
thing.
They do the same thing, but McCaffrey actually does it better. That's why
Yep.
he's not highlighted as much. I still think Debo will have a good season, but when McCaffrey can gash you for over 150 yards on the ground, and like you said, Bosa didn't have to go to his pitch count because the Steelers hardly possessed the football. They were just getting dominated. The idea that you could just run through the Steelers like that, the way the Niners did, I was more than surprised. Really pleased with what Purdy did, the way he spread the ball out. So to me, game one was the 49ers saying, it's not just the Eagles in the NFC. We're still here too.
I was wrong about the Cleveland Browns. I was not expecting what we saw yesterday. I thought that the Bengals were going to roll them. Um, I don't know what more to say, Mel. I'm happy because I have Chubb and Watson on my fantasy football team that I did not draft, and I couldn't get rid of them. So I'm happy
That
because
worked
I
out well.
rolled to a victory in that league this week. I just didn't think the defense was going to look as great as it did. I thought Watson looked good and great at times. I think that he, has some things he needs to polish up a little bit, but he looked way better than I thought he was going to look. But that defense, Mo, that defense looked elite against what is supposed to be a Super Bowl contending offense.
Well, you have to have an identity. And what Cleveland had coming into the game, what they had last year, they can run the football. Nick Chubb in that run game is going to always be there. They can run the football. But if Deshaun Watson can be special, if he can make some untimely plays where there shouldn't be a play there at times, that's what's going to make them a unique football team. But that defense, I think JG was talking earlier in the show about when you don't have enough time, can your receivers make a play within 2 or 3 seconds? That's what happened against the Bengals. The 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 Browns front seven was so dominant. They were able to get pressure so much on Joe Burrow that Jamar Chase and that crew, they couldn't get free. They couldn't get separation. And I was impressed with how the Browns decided to switch up from the zone and play more man. And they got away with it because of the pressure they got. Like, I've Joe Burrow's had bad games before. Like, all great players have. But he looked less than mortal yesterday. Like, they totally had him baffled, confused. And when you can lock down a receiving core like that, I give the defense all the credit. But watching the game as a whole, I actually think the Bengals' offensive line is worse than it was last year. And it wasn't any good last year. They've got some trouble. They've got some concerns.
Mo, 6 weeks ago, I sat here in the morning show right here on Sports Empire Network, and I laid out a scenario. I said that if you look at the Kansas City Chiefs team last year and just their pieces, the coach, the quarterback, the one weapon on offense, the great defensive player, the good linebacker, the young secondary, and you took all of that and you moved it to a team this season that had the same game plan, that team is the Rams. And I said that although the Rams are not going to be contending for a Super Bowl, the fact that people are saying 3 or 4 wins for this team was ridiculous because they had the same blueprint that Kansas City had. They're just not as talented in those positions, but they're still talented enough to push for a playoff spot. Now, I know we're only week one in, Mo, but they knocked off the Seattle Seahawks convincingly. The Rams are not going to be a 3-win team. I said it 6 weeks ago, and I think the Rams said it yesterday. Where are you on the Rams?
I'm in the one place we should all be looking at. If Matthew Stafford can stay healthy and stay upright, it makes them competitive in every game they're in. If you can keep his jersey relatively clean, the guy can pick people apart. And he can do it down the middle. He can push it down the field. He can make all the small throws. I actually thought that the chemistry between him and those young receivers, it was really impressive. I was like,
The
you
yearbook.
didn't know Cup wasn't there. You didn't know Cup wasn't there. They were breaking free, getting separation, and he was hitting them in stride. I was really impressed with both sides of the ball. But if Stafford's going to play at that level and those young guys can still sustain that kind of impact, that kind of production, then I'll admit I was wrong. I was one of those guys. I'll be honest. I was one of those guys. I'm looking at the Rams, both sides of the football. I'm thinking 4, maybe 5 wins. And I don't want to make too much of week one, but that's a good Seattle team that has aspirations of trying to win that division. And they handled them. They handled them with pretty much ease. They handled them. And think about the receiving core that Seattle throws out there, how they were able to completely control them. I was very impressed because I didn't think the Rams had enough playmakers on defense to do what they did to Seattle.
When you make a yearbook to learn your teammates' names, good things happen. That's all I'm saying.
You know what? That's a plug for the yearbook.
The Jordan Love era kicked off in Green Bay, Mo, and hey, the kid's all right.
You know what? We talked about he didn't have to be Aaron Rodgers. He didn't have to throw for 400 yards. If he could just be consistent and make timely throws, he was all those things yesterday. And it was interesting because going into the season, so many people were certain that the Packers might be the worst team in that division. A lot of people thought that. And I was never really sure because I hadn't seen that much of him. So in my eyes, all I thought of what he could or what he needed to be for them to be competitive. If he can be solid and not turn the ball over, they're going to be interesting to watch. And when you look at the Bears, look, much is expected, right? We look at the Bears, dynamic talent at the quarterback position, and I still think he's going to have a big year numbers wise. I'm just not sure that's going to translate to wins because I still think Chris, he's still learning the quarterback position. Like his first instinct is still to run. It's still to rely on his legs. And you can get by on that but so long, and sooner or later it's going to catch up with you. So I'm not saying season's over again. We're just talking about week one. But looking at how he played in week one, he looked like the same young man from last year with more weapons, but he still looked like the same quarterback from last year. So he's still developing. He's still learning that offense. But I was really impressed with Jordan Love. How could you not be impressed with Jordan Love? And anybody out there who plays fantasy football, man, you love to have a guy like Aaron Jones. My gosh, like that kid can get you 90 yards on the ground, but he can get you 100 yards receiving. And like he's a dynamic talent. I think the Packers are going to surprise all of us when it's all said and done.
And Justin Fields is now 5-21 as a starting quarterback in this league. And some people, Freddie, Gene, have him in the top 10. They're top 10 quarterbacks of 2023. He is 5-21 as a starter. I will not. I'm going to die on this hill, Mo. He is not a top 15 quarterback. He just isn't.
Oh, I'm not. Look, I'm rooting for him to become what he has the potential to become, but I don't think he's a top 15 quarterback either. He's a top 3 athlete. He might be a top 3 playmaker. He's not a top 15 quarterback.
New season, new coach, same outcome if you're the Denver Broncos. It was close. Your defense played well. The game was there for you. Russell played better. I think he completed almost 80% of his passes, but you still lost. Now, you can look at it and say, well, Chris, they missed a field goal they should have made. They missed an extra point they should have made. That's the game right there. Okay, that's fine. But they should have beat the Raiders. The Denver Broncos did not come into this season saying we're going to compete with the Las Vegas Raiders. They came into this season saying we're going to compete for a playoff spot. And I'm sorry, the Raiders are not competing for a playoff spot. So, Mo, were you happy with what you saw week one from Russell Wilson? And then where is this team right now? Is this a wild card contending team? Or are they fighting with the Raiders to see who finishes last in that division?
If this is going to be their offense going forward, if this is how Sean Payton's going to call the game, then they're going to be last in the division. If you remember when Sean Payton had gotten hold of Jameis Winston, right? His completion percentage shot up. He basically got him to go away from being Jameis. But by going away from being Jameis, 4-yard pass, 3-yard pass, 4-yard pass, 5-yard pass, he wasn't being true to who he was. I watched the game, and that wasn't Russell Wilson out there. That wasn't what Russell Wilson. He stayed in the pocket, and what Sean Payton wants him to do is take what's there. And so you can take the 5-yard dink and dunk. So high percentage, but you're not really moving the ball down the field. You're not really threatening the defense. The 2 touchdowns they got, what happened? Russ stepped outside of the pocket, and on the move, he made a play. That's Russell Wilson. If Sean Payton is going to keep that tight a leash on him, then they're not going to be very good, because I really thought watching that game, most of the game, Russell Wilson was doing what Sean Payton won. He wasn't really playing like Russell Wilson. And remember, we all know their top 3 receivers, they're not even on the field. They're not even on the field. The run game was better than I thought it would be. The defense wasn't bad. The defense is still one of the better defenses, but if you're going to have Russell Wilson, I guess, handcuffed to a degree where he can't be spontaneous, he can't be Russ, you're not going to be very good. Something's got to give. Sean Payton's got to open up the playbook and go, I get it, Russ. We have to mix it up. Let you be you to a degree. These playing it safe. What's the line? Scared money don't make money.
That's right.
You got to play. You got to let the man play.
And I'll tell you who played yesterday, Mo. My man, QB1, Tua Tagovailoa. Him and Tyreek Hill played yesterday. Tyreek Hill, 11 catches, 215 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He is now second on the all-time list of receivers with 200-yard games with 2+ receiving touchdowns. He now has 3, 2 of them as a Miami Dolphin, 1 behind the all-time record for that. Mo, Tua and Herbert will always be linked together because of where they were drafted. And should Miami have taken Herbert, but they took Tua, and Herbert won the first exchange last season, 23-17. But Tua put the stake in the ground, in my opinion, yesterday. He went out there, 466 yards passing. He now has two of the highest passing individual stat games in Dolphin history. It's Marino, Tua. So let that sink in for a minute. It wasn't Tannehill. It wasn't Fiedler. It wasn't any of the other 25 quarterbacks
I think
Miami's
that
had
says it
since
all.
Marino.
If you're in the company with Dan Marino, that says it all.
Right? But looking at, I mean, obviously the defense, well, that's a question mark, and that needs to be adjusted. You don't want to be giving up 34 points. But Mo, I say this all the time. When you look at, the Chiefs and the Bills a couple of years ago in the AFC Championship game, no one walked out of that game saying, "Man, that Buffalo defense gave up 40 points to the Chiefs," or "Man, that Chiefs defense almost let Buffalo score 40." No one walked away saying that. They walked away saying, "Wow, look at two of the best quarterbacks in the league just go out there and do work and try to will their team to a victory." That happens sometimes in this league. When you play against good quarterbacks, they're going to get their points. And I'm not saying Miami's defense is anything to write home about right now, but what I am saying is Tua did everything yesterday that we needed to see him do. He led the offense with craftsman precision. Deep ball after deep ball after deep ball. And you can tell me all day, well, he's throwing a Tyreek Hill. I don't care. Cover him. Cover the man. Because clearly you can't cover him. And he's dropping dimes left and right to Tyreek Hill. But more importantly, Mo, he didn't get sacked. He got hit twice. He didn't hit the ground. It was a clean game across the board for him. And Mo, I will say this, and this is not overreaction Monday. I'm saying this. Miami is the best team in that division. Where do you sit on that?
I don't know if that's an overreaction or not. What I will say is, if Tua can stay upright, and because we always caveat everything with injury or health because it's unpredictable, and that applies to all teams, all quarterbacks, the whole universe. But if Tua's going to be healthy, they will win that division. They will win that division. What I think people forget about Tua is he's always been accurate. He's always been a very accurate thrower of football, but he can push the ball down the field, man. Like that little man's there's some cannon in that arm. It may not be that typical cannon you think about. It's not the Elway. It's not that kind of cannon. But Tyreek Hill's not running and he's not turning around catching the ball because it's behind him. He's getting hit in stride. Like Tua's putting that ball on the money. And when you try to stop Tyreek Hill, guess what? Here comes Waddle. Right? Here comes Waddle. It's easy to say he's got Tyreek Hill. You knew he had Tyreek Hill coming into the game. That's not look, the cheetah's a beast. But when Tua's throwing the ball with that much force, with that much accuracy, and he's just dissecting your defense, that's about him. Look, if Tua's going to be this guy and stay healthy, you can call this an overreaction, but I'll put it out there. I would be shocked if he doesn't finish in the top 2 in MVP.
I agree.
I'm just putting it out there. I'm being real. It's week 1, but he was great last year as well before the injuries. We all know that. So all I'm saying is, if Tua can continue to throw the ball away, not hold the ball too long, because I didn't see, he didn't hold the ball too long. When it wasn't there, he threw the ball away. You want to see that as a Dolphins fan. You don't always have to make a big play on every down. Live to come back another down. Maybe you go 3 and out. Come back the next time.
Well, one of my favorite parts of the game yesterday as a Dolphin fan was it was early in the game. It was in the first quarter. They're in the red zone. I don't think it was a goal-to-go situation. I think it was like a first down inside the 15-yard line. But he rolls to the left, and the play's not there, and he just spikes it into the ground at the fullback's feet. And I said right there, I was like, that's it. Because last year's Tua would have tried to force that ball. Last year's Tua would have hung on to it until he got hit. Mm-hmm. And then, it's an interception or incomplete pass or whatever the case might be. But he rolled out. It wasn't there. It was first down. He said, screw it. Let's live to play second down. And they did. So that was big for me. But Mo, let's wrap up our last game before we pick the Monday Night Football game. I thought it was going to be a good game, Mo. It was maybe one of the worst games to watch all of yesterday with the Dallas Cowboys destroying the New York Giants.
That was brutal.
I don't have a positive thing to say about the New York Football Giants. And Dallas Cowboy fan, take your flowers. Your defense was absolutely dominant. Your special teams was absolutely dominant. I will say Dak Prescott played okay. Dak Prescott was not elite yesterday. Dak Prescott did not torch the Giants yesterday. So I don't want Dallas fan coming out of this saying Dak Prescott's a top 5 quarterback, because he didn't have to do that yesterday. He just had to not give the game away after your defense and special teams were scoring touchdowns for you. So I don't walk away, Dallas fans, saying, Dak Prescott. Don't even talk about Dak Prescott. Talk about your special teams. Talk about your defense, because those two aspects destroyed the Giants. And your offense just basically went out there and was like, "Well, we got to run some plays here, guys. We should do something too." They were not the focal point of that game.
Not at all.
So props to those two areas of the ball for the Dallas Cowboys. And I'm not taking anything away from Dak. All right, I still think they're going to be successful. But
I do too.
What I'm saying, Mo, is if your special teams and defense are going to play like this, that's what Dak Prescott needs. Dak needs the other areas of the game to be elite, because when they are, he plays better. So if that's what happens for Dallas this season, then they are on the right track. But Mo, let's talk about the New York Giants. What the hell was that? You cannot come out there against a division rival who many thought you guys, even if you weren't on the same level, you weren't that far away from them. This wasn't the Kansas City Chiefs and the Las Vegas Raiders.
Right.
You were supposed to be pretty close
They
as
were
far as
expecting a
talent.
competitive game.
Correct. And to go out there and he looked lost. Danny Dimes, I mean, besides the fact he was running for his life, sacked 7 times. I think his completion percentage was like 52%. He barely passed for 100 yards. It was a disaster, Mo. Is this the Danny Dimes we're going to see this season?
Well, okay, selfishly, I hope not, because he's on my fantasy
He's
football
on your
team.
fantasy team.
So I'm going to need a better version of Danny Dimes going forward. Look, Daniel Jones is a terrific athlete, terrific playmaker. And I guess we're going to have to find a happy middle and say, I think he's better than 15 touchdowns and 5 picks. But I don't think he's going to get you 30 touchdowns, at least not 30 touchdowns through the air. He could probably get you 30 in an entirety because he can run for 10. There's a better version of Daniel Jones out there. I will say this. Getting Waller or adding him to your receiving core, it helps a little. But I want everybody out there to not be confused. Waller is not Travis Kelce. And he might be a better athlete, but he's not George Kittle either. He's not. What Waller is he's a guy who has wide receiver speed at the tight end position, but he will disappear from time to time in games. It's what he does. He had a 122-yard catch, and then the other two catches I think combined for like 14 yards total. He just disappears at time. The Giants' offensive line, if this is what it's going to be going forward, I mean, you can say poor Daniel Jones, but poor Saquon as well. I have to expect Dayball and his assistant coaches will coach them up. But if this is the separation between them and Dallas, that doesn't bode well for the Giants. I really thought coming into the season, Chris, that for them to be what they were last year in terms of their record, Danny Dimes had to be better. He had to be a better version of himself. Saquon had to be better. They had to go out and get a playmaker on the outside, which they didn't do. I don't think their defense is awful. I just thought that Dallas's offense got to play with the short side of the field. They had the short side of the field, and the defense can't help with turnovers or what special teams does. I mean, most of their success came from the Giants' offense's failure. So you're right, Dak wasn't great, but he only had to be solid when your special team and your defense is going to be that dominant. If you're just solid and you play with the short side of the field and you do score when you're supposed to, then you're going to be good to go. I think if you're a Giants fan, how can you not be worried? I know it's just game 1, but there's a huge gap between you and the Cowboys. And if there's a gap between you and the Cowboys, there's probably a bigger gap between you and the Eagles.
Well, I'll say it. Daniel Jones is the fourth best quarterback in that division. Sam Howell played well yesterday. He played above competent yesterday. And I think that Washington has more talent than the New York Giants have. And I'll be intrigued to see when those two teams play what that looks like. But I think what we saw yesterday was the Eagles are the class of that division. The Cowboys might be closer to the Eagles than we think. And the Giants are nowhere near the first or second place team in that division. And if you're a Giant fan, that's something that you're going to have trouble swallowing this morning. But I hope that Dable can figure it out because, like you said, it is just one game and we move on and we play next week. But if this is what it's going to look like or something close to what it's going to look like, it's going to be a long year for Danny Dimes.
To be fair, like you said, it's game one, Giants fans. So we're not anybody that lost in week one. Nobody's killing you. The same way that there's some teams that won that we were kind of surprised about, but there's this thing that in all sports, you're supposed to beat the teams you're supposed to beat, right? There are certain teams on your schedule where you're like, that's a win. Then we move forward because in the NFL, that whole thing about beating who you're supposed to beat, it's even bigger because you have a shorter amount of time to do it in 17 games. And inside a division, when you have a bad division loss, Denver fans, that's like it's a one loss, but it feels like two losses when you think about the bigger picture. You cannot lose to the Los Angeles Raiders. If you're going to lose to the Los Angeles Raiders, you're going to be the worst team in that division. Somebody's getting fired. So there's going to be some. If Denver's going to be the worst team in that division after bringing Sean Payton over, there are going to be some major changes going into next season.
All right, Mo, let's close out the show. Tonight we have the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets, and I will not come off of this hill. The loser of tonight's game, they're in trouble because the Dolphins won and they look elite. The Patriots lost, but we expected them to lose. Defense played all right, but it is what it is. The loser of this game tonight, and I think if I had to balance it a little bit, I think a Jets loss is worse for their fan base than a Buffalo loss, only because the Jets are going to go play Dallas next week. So if you lose to Buffalo week 1, you're now behind Buffalo and Miami, who you're supposed to be competing with for the division. So if you lose tonight, you're behind Buffalo and Miami, and you're going to go play a Dallas team that just destroyed the Giants and ransacked their O-line and their quarterback. And what is the New York Jets' biggest concern? The O-line and the mobility of their quarterback. So if the Jets lose tonight, I think it's a little more sky is falling. But at the same time, if Buffalo loses tonight, they're in a very similar boat. They lost a division game. The Jets and the Dolphins are both 1-0. Right. The only difference is Buffalo plays Washington and the Raiders next, their next 2 games. So the Buffalo can look at it and be like, we need to go take care of business before Miami rolls in week 4, and we can kind of right the ship. Whereas the Jets look at it and say, we have a gauntlet we have to run through, and we're already down 1 in the division. So I think it's a little less sky is falling if Buffalo loses than it is if the Jets lose. But I think it's a big deal, as big of a week 1 loss that you can have is what's going to happen for both these teams, whichever one ends up losing. That being said, Mo, I'm going Buffalo tonight. And I don't like either of these teams. I don't particularly. I mean, I like Aaron Rodgers more than I like Josh Allen. I cannot stand Josh Allen. But with the New York Jets, I have to see it work. Like JG said, I have to see it work first. Once I see Aaron have rapport with the receivers, and once I see the O-line hold up, and once I see the defense is still a top 5 defense like it was last season, and Wilson is still potentially a top 5 or top 10 receiver like he was at the end of his rookie season, once I see all that, I might be like, okay, I'm comfortable picking the Jets. But I haven't seen it. All I know is all the potential problems they have, and now they're trying to fix it by bringing in Aaron Rodgers. Whereas with the Bills, I've seen them win games with diva Stephon Diggs. I've seen them win games with up and down Josh Allen. I've seen them win games with poor play calling decisions. They've overcome that before. So all the issues I potentially have with Buffalo, I've seen them win in those situations. I haven't seen the Jets do that yet because they haven't had the chance to do so.
Gotcha.
So by default, I'm going Buffalo tonight, but I think it's going to be a close game. I don't think either of these teams blows out the other team. But by God, by golly gosh, Mo, if either of these teams get blown out, it might be worst case
Oh
scenario
yeah,
for a
yeah.
week one game. But I think it's going to be a competitive game. I think it's going to be a close game. But I'm going to take Buffalo by 3.
I think it's a close game, but I feel about this game much like the Cincinnati Cleveland game. I feel like if Aaron Rodgers has to be under duress the way that Joe Burrow was, I don't think his receivers can get separation in time. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like that's what the game's going to come down to. It's I don't have a dog in the fight, but when I'm looking at their offensive line problems, I'm looking at Von Miller being back for
No,
Buffalo.
no Von Miller tonight.
No Von Miller. Oh, no Von
No,
Miller.
he's going to miss the first 4.
Then that's not good. But that's not good. That bodes well for Aaron Rodgers. That said, their offensive line is still porous. So what I would say is, when I'm looking at a close game, I'll take the Bills in a close game only because I've got question marks about the offensive line, and I've got question marks with the actual chemistry that Aaron Rodgers has or hasn't developed with that young receiving core. So I'm gonna have to see what the Jets are look like down the road. But coming out the box, game one, I'm gonna give it to the Bills because, like you said, I've seen that Bills unit for the last 3 or 4 years. What I know, they've got drama in their locker room and divas and the whole nine, but they've won. They've won together. This Jets team is a brand new team.
And Jet fan, I'm not hating on you. I'm really not. Like I said, I just haven't seen it. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know. We all think. I mean, let's be honest. Almost everyone outside of the morning show is drinking the Jets Kool-Aid here at Sports Empire Network. You go on all our other shows, and everyone's praising the New York Jets, picking them to go to the AFC Championship game, the Super
13
Bowl.
wins. 13 wins.
Right, 13 wins. Jets fans are drinking the Kool-Aid. They're the darlings of the NFL media. So I get that everyone is high on the Jets, and I'm not saying they can't be those things. All I'm saying is I need to see it before I start picking them to win games. And I've seen Buffalo overcome nonsense. I just haven't seen the Jets do it. And by the way, Aaron Rodgers, Mo, doesn't have a history of overcoming nonsense. Look at Green Bay last year. It was a struggle for the majority of the year. And you can say he played better at the second half of the season as chemistry started to develop. But the reason there wasn't chemistry in the first half of the season was he didn't care. He didn't invest himself in the process. So we've seen Aaron not do well in situations like this. I'm not saying that it's going to be a meltdown. All I'm saying is let's see what it looks like, and then maybe I'll start picking the Jets to win games
And
down the
this is the
line.
honeymoon. Don't forget, Chris, this is the honeymoon period. So even if they lose, you're probably still going to have smiling Aaron. You know what I mean? Like I still think you're in the honeymoon period, at least for the first, let's say, 3 or 4 weeks. If they're, say, 2-4, 6 weeks in, then you won't see smiling Aaron anymore, and it'll be a completely different team. It's early, and I'm not writing the Jets off. I'm simply picking Buffalo week one, game one.
Now, Mo, I'll say that the smile might be gone if they lose the first 2. If they lose to Buffalo and then they get beat up by the Cowboys, there's a lot of pressure on that team going into week 3 facing 0-3. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I think it's going to be a great game tonight, Mo. Before we get out of here, thank you to everyone who is joining us this morning on the morning show. As you can see, I'm not in my normal locale. I am on the West Coast this week. So we're making things happen from the other side of the country. I appreciate everyone who was in the chat this morning. I appreciate JG for coming on the show to break down college football and Major League Baseball. And Mo, take us out.
Hey, appreciate everybody in the chat. Check out all the great content coming out of Empire Sports Network. Check out Kyle, Gene, and the crew on Cheap Seats tonight at 6:30. Check out the Empire.
We'll see you same time, same place tomorrow morning here on the morning show with Chris and Mo on Sports Empire Network.